I stared at the check, the number $200,000 printed in crisp, corporate font, swimming slightly before my eyes. It wasn't just money, it was vindication, a six-figure apology for the vacation from hell that had almost broken me. But to understand how I got this check, we have to go back to the beginning, back to a life that I thought was perfect. For 5 years, Innovatech Solutions wasn't just my employer, it was my life. As a senior project manager, my world was a symphony of color-coded Gantt charts, resource allocation spreadsheets, and late-night conference calls with teams in different time zones. I didn't just manage projects, I lived them. I was the first one in the office, my keyboard clicking away while the city was still dark, and often the last one out, the fluorescent lights of our open-plan office humming a lonely tune just for me. My dedication was my pride. I was the one who volunteered for the impossible projects, the ones with tight deadlines and even tighter budgets that everyone else dodged. I remember the Atlas launch, a platform integration that had been failing for 2 years before it landed on my desk. I spent 3 months sleeping with my laptop, dreaming in code I didn't even write, and subsisting on lukewarm coffee and the adrenaline of a looming deadline. We launched on time, under budget, and the company newsletter called it a landmark achievement. My boss, David, took the executive team out for steaks to celebrate. I got a great job in the hallway the next day. I didn't mind, or at least I told myself I didn't. The satisfaction of a perfectly executed plan was my reward. Seeing a complex, multifaceted project click into place was like solving the world's most intricate puzzle. It was my art form. My apartment was minimalist and tidy, but my work calendar was a chaotic masterpiece of overlapping appointments and reminders that only I could decipher. I sacrificed weekends, missed birthdays, and my dating life was a running joke among my friends. But I was good at my job, respected, and on a clear path to a director-level position. I was playing the long game, and I was winning. After the grueling success of the Atlas launch, I finally decided to cash in the vacation days that had been piling up for 2 years. A 10-day trip to Spain, just for me. No laptops, no work phone, just tapas, sunshine, and a long overdue reunion with myself. I spent a month meticulously planning my absence, creating a 30-page handover document so detailed it included the mobile numbers of third-party vendors and the preferred coffee orders of key stakeholders. I was leaving my team in a fortress of preparedness. The day before I was set to fly out, David called me into his glass-walled office. He was leaning back in his ridiculously expensive ergonomic chair, a picture of relaxed authority. "Sarah," he began, steepling his fingers, "just wanted to wish you a fantastic trip. All set for the sunny shores of, where was it again?" "Spain," I said, offering a tight smile. "And yes, everything is completely under control. The handover docs are on the shared drive, and I walked Jessica through the current sprint this morning. You won't even know I'm gone." He chuckled, a dry, airy sound that never quite reached his eyes. "Oh, I think we'll know you're gone, Sarah. You're the glue that holds this department together." He leaned forward, his smile turning slightly strained. "You absolutely deserve this break. Gosh, nobody works harder than you. I just hope the team can keep up the pace without you. You've set a very, very high bar." A familiar knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. It was his signature move, the compliment wrapped around a core of pure pressure. He was praising me while simultaneously implying that my absence would cause the very foundations of the company to crumble. "Jessica is more than capable," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "She's ready for the responsibility." Of course," David said, waving a dismissive hand. "I have total faith. It's just, you have a certain magic, you know. Anyway, don't you worry about a thing. Go. Relax. Have a sangria for me. Just maybe keep your phone on, you know, for a real emergency." He winked, and I felt a chill despite the warm afternoon sun streaming through the window. It was the kind of wink that didn't feel friendly. It felt like a warning. I walked out of his office, the excitement for my trip now tinged with a vague, unsettling sense of dread. I pushed it down, telling myself I was overthinking it. I had earned this vacation, I had planned for it, Nothing was going to go wrong. The first 5 days in Spain were a dream. I ate my weight in patatas bravas, wandered through the sun-drenched alleys of Seville, and let the afternoon heat melt away years of accumulated stress. I didn't check my email. I let my work phone die. For the first time in my adult life, I was truly, blissfully offline. On day 6, I was sitting at a small cafe in Granada, a book open on my lap, when my personal phone, the one I'd kept on for emergencies, began to buzz. It was a number from the office. I ignored it. It buzzed again and again, a knot of dread, the same one I'd felt in David's office, tightened in my stomach. I finally answered. It was David. His voice was a frantic caricature of his usual cool demeanor. "Sarah, thank God, we have a massive problem, a real emergency." The emergency was a server migration issue with a third-party vendor. It wasn't my project, but the vendor lead was someone I had a long-standing relationship with. "He'll only talk to you, Sarah. He says you're the only one who understands the specs. We're about to lose the client." My carefully constructed piece shattered. "David, the specs are in the handover document, page 17, I said, my voice tight. "They need your magic, Sarah," he pleaded. "Just one call, an hour tops. You'll save us, you always do." 1 hour turned into a 3-day ordeal. My hotel room became a makeshift office. I spent my days on conference calls, my nights reviewing server logs and drafting technical emails, the beautiful Spanish moonlight mocking me through the window. I missed my tour of the Alhambra. I ate stale room service sandwiches instead of paella. I saved the project, of course. David sent a one-line email. "You're a lifesaver." I flew home exhausted, my vacation a mangled wreck, but I consoled myself with the thought that my dedication would be recognized. I had, once again, proven my indispensability. 2 weeks after my return, David called a mandatory all-hands meeting for our department. He stood at the front of the conference room, beaming. "I've got some exciting news," he announced. "As you know, we've had a banner year, and that's down to the hard work of this team. To that end, I'm thrilled to announce a new director of project management." My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it, the long game paying off. This person has shown incredible initiative and leadership, especially over the last month, stepping up to fill a major vacuum and ensuring the successful delivery of the Q3 initiatives, David continued. "A vacuum?" He was talking about my vacation. "Please join me in congratulating Jessica." The room erupted in applause. Jessica, my protege, the one I had meticulously trained, turned beet red as everyone patted her on the back. I sat frozen, a hollow ringing in my ears. I clapped along, my hands feeling like foreign objects, a pained smile plastered on my face. After the meeting, I found David in the hallway. "David, can I have a word?" "Sure, Sarah. Great meeting, huh? Jessica's going to be fantastic." "I'm happy for her," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "I'm just confused. The director role was the next step on my development plan. We've been talking about it for a year." He sighed, his friendly mask dropping away to reveal something cold and hard beneath. "Look, Sarah, you're a great project manager, a real workhorse. But leadership is about more than just execution. It's about presence. You were gone for 2 weeks. "It was 10 days, I corrected him, "and I worked for 3 of them. I saved the Viridian account while I was supposedly on vacation." He actually scoffed. Frankly, that just showed a lack of planning. If your team had been properly prepared, you wouldn't have needed to be called. And while you were off enjoying the sun, Jessica was here, in the trenches, leading the team. We need people who are fully committed. The injustice of it hit me like a physical blow. The air left my lungs. "Committed?" I whispered. "I've given this company 5 years of my life. I've sacrificed weekends, holidays, my own well-being. And we appreciate that," he said with a dismissive wave, "which is why this is so difficult. Your annual performance bonus, we've decided to reallocate it." There it was, the financial blow, the $30,000 I was counting on to finally pay off my student loans. Reallocate it? To whom? To the team members who really went above and beyond this quarter, to Jessica for her leadership. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a confidential, cruel whisper. Honestly, Sarah, your focus has been slipping. You checked out. After that trip, you don't deserve it. I just stood there, speechless, the hallway noise fading into a dull roar. He had used my sacrifice against me, twisted my dedication into a flaw, and punished me for the vacation he'd insisted I take. If you've ever been made to feel small after giving something your all, you know exactly how I felt in that moment. And if this is your first time here, you might want to subscribe, because this was the moment I stopped being a workhorse and started planning my revenge. I walked back to my desk, sat down in my chair, and for the first time in 5 years, I didn't see a single project on my screen. I just saw red. Seeing red was one thing, acting on it was another. The project manager in me, the part that had run my life for 5 years, couldn't just throw a tantrum or quit in a blaze of glory. That wasn't a strategy. That was a system crash. No, I needed a plan. I needed to approach this like any other failing project. Assess the damage, review the documentation, and attempt a professional resolution before escalating. I spent the weekend not in a rage, but in a state of cold, meticulous fury. I pulled up my employment contract, my last 5 annual performance reviews, all glowing, and the company HR policies on promotions and bonuses. I cross-referenced emails, saving the one from David begging me to work on my vacation and the one-line lifesaver email he sent after. I built a case, complete with a timeline and supporting evidence, as if I were preparing for a client arbitration. It was all there, in black and white, a story of exemplary performance, of sacrifice above and beyond my duties, and of a clear, documented career path that had been suddenly and unjustly derailed. On Monday morning, I sent David a meeting invitation. The subject line was neutral, follow-up discussion. He accepted without comment. I walked into his office at the scheduled time, a single folder in my hands. He was on the phone, laughing about some golf game. He waved me in, motioning for me to take a seat while he finished his call. The casual disrespect was a deliberate power move, meant to put me on the back foot. I waited, my back straight, my expression unreadable. "All right, Sarah, what's on your mind?" he said finally, hanging up and swiveling his chair toward me. "David, I wanted to follow up on our conversation from Friday," I began, my voice even and calm. I opened the folder on his desk. "I've spent the last few days reviewing my performance history in the terms of my employment. As you know, I've consistently exceeded expectations for 5 years. We established a development plan a year ago that identified the director role as my next step, contingent on my performance, which has remained high." I slid my last review across the desk. The exceeds expectations box ticked in every category. Furthermore, regarding the bonus, company policy ties it to annual performance, not a single quarter. And to penalize me for taking approved vacation time during which I also worked, at your request, to solve a company emergency, seems to be a misapplication of that policy. I paused, letting him look at the papers. I hadn't raised my voice. I had presented facts, logic. I appealed to the system we both supposedly worked within. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding," I concluded, "and I'd like to discuss how we can rectify it." David stared at the papers for a long moment. He tapped a finger on my performance review. Then he leaned back in his chair, a slow, condescending smile spreading across his face. And then he laughed. It wasn't a loud laugh, but a short, sharp, airy puff of sound, full of derision. It was the most insulting sound I had ever heard. "Oh, Sarah," he chuckled, shaking his head as if I were a child who just tried to explain quantum physics using finger puppets. "Is this what you've been doing all weekend? Homework? You brought me paperwork?" He pushed the folder back toward me without giving it another glance. "You still don't get it, do you? All this," he gestured to my carefully compiled evidence, "this just proves my point. You're a process drone. You think the world runs on neat little documents and HR policies? It doesn't. It runs on perception. It runs on who's in the room when it counts." He leaned forward, the humor gone, replaced by a flat, cold finality. "While you were on your little Spanish siesta, Jessica was in the room, While you were building your little folder of grievances, she was leading her first director-level meeting. I don't care what some policy says. I made a decision based on leadership, and you, frankly, showed none. You showed you were a flight risk. This conversation is over. The decision is final. I felt the blood drain from my face. My carefully constructed case, my logical appeal, had been swatted away like a fly. He hadn't even bothered to argue the facts. He had just dismissed them, and me along with them. I couldn't breathe. I just sat there, clutching the folder, the crisp edges of the paper digging into my fingers. The sound of the office outside his glass walls, the keyboards clicking, the low hum of conversation, seemed to warp and fade into a distant roar. My meticulously planned world, the one I had sacrificed everything for, had just been revealed as a fragile illusion. I followed the rules. I worked harder than anyone. I documented everything. I played the long game. And for what? To be laughed at. To be called a drone by the man who had exploited my diligence for years. The $30,000 bonus wasn't just money. It was the key to a life without the crushing weight of student debt. The promotion wasn't just a title. It was the finish line I had been sprinting toward for half a decade. He hadn't just taken them away. He had mocked me for ever thinking I deserved them. The desperation was a physical thing, a cold, heavy stone in the pit of my stomach. I had no move left. I had no appeal. I had done everything right, and I had lost. Completely. In that hollow, silent moment sitting in his stupidly expensive chair, I realized the game I was playing had been rigged from the start. And if you can't win by playing by the rules, you have to write new ones. I walked out of David's office, but I don't remember my feet touching the floor. The folder in my hand felt impossibly heavy, a tombstone for my career. His laughter echoed in my ears, a sharp, cruel sound that had sliced through 5 years of loyalty and left me bleeding out in a sea of fluorescent light. A drone. A flight risk. The words clung to me, heavy and suffocating. I reached my desk, sank into my chair, and stared at the screen, my sanctuary, now a monument to my own stupidity. For a full hour, I did nothing. I just sat there, a ghost in my own life, while the office buzzed around me. Jessica walked by, her face flushed with excitement, and gave me a small, pitying smile. The kind you give someone who's just had their dog die. The humiliation was a physical burn, creeping up my neck. I had followed all the rules. I had played the game with ferocious integrity. And David had just explained with chilling clarity that the game was a lie. The despair was a thick black oil threatening to drown me. But then something else sparked deep in the wreckage. It was the project manager in me. The part of my brain that, when faced with a catastrophic system failure, doesn't panic. It starts triaging. It starts documenting. It starts looking for a weakness in the code. David thought he had won, that he had broken me. He had made a critical error. He hadn't broken me. He had just deleted the old project plan. It was time to scope a new one. My hands moved with a new purpose, not of rage, but of ice-cold clarity. The old me would have drafted a resignation letter. The new me opened a fresh, password-protected document. I named it Project Chimera. The objective, not just to survive, but to win. The rules of his game were based on perception and presence. The rules of my new game would be based on something he couldn't dismiss or redefine: the law. I started digging. Not in HR policy documents. He'd already shown me what he thought of those. I went to the source: state and federal labor law. I typed phrases into my browser that made my fingers tremble. Retaliation for taking vacation. Constructive dismissal, California. Denied promotion after leave. I wasn't a lawyer, but I was an expert at research, at finding the one critical detail in a mountain of data. And then I found it. The California Fair Employment and Housing Act. FEHA. It wasn't just about discrimination based on race or gender. It contained powerful anti-retaliation provisions. An employer couldn't punish an employee for exercising their rights, and taking earned, approved vacation was a right. His words came back to me. While you were off enjoying the sun, it was a direct link, but it was still his word against mine. A jury might believe him. I needed more. I needed proof. I needed something he wrote himself. My mind raced through the company's digital architecture, a map I knew better than my own apartment. I had built half of these systems. I knew where the bodies were buried because I had helped design the cemeteries. Promotions at the director level weren't just announced. They required a formal nomination packet submitted to HR and the executive board, a paper trail. My access levels were still active. He hadn't thought to revoke them. Why would he? I was just a workhorse, a drone. Drones don't fight back. I navigated to the secure HR submissions portal on the shared drive. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. I typed in the search bar, Director Promotion Q3. A folder appeared. My breath caught. Inside were two documents, a PDF of Jessica's resume and another PDF titled J. Miller, Director Nomination Form D. Hess. Jessica Miller, David Hess. I clicked it open. It was a standard corporate form. Candidate name, proposed title, salary band. And then a large text box with the heading Justification for Promotion. I leaned closer to the screen, my world shrinking to the glowing white rectangle. And there it was, in David's own words, typed out in sterile, corporate Arial font. Jessica has shown unparalleled leadership and commitment during a period of significant challenge. She stepped up to fill a leadership vacuum created by Sarah Morgan's extended vacation, ensuring all Q3 initiatives remained on track. While Ms. Morgan is a competent executor, her decision to fully disconnect during this time demonstrates a lack of the always-on commitment required at the director level. Jessica's presence and leadership in the office during this critical period prove she is the right choice for this role and is fully aligned with Innovatech's core values. I read it once, then twice. The air rushed out of my lungs in a silent, shaky gasp. It was all there, the smoking gun. He hadn't just said it to my face. He had written it down. He had signed his name to a formal document, explicitly stating that the reason I was passed over for a promotion was that I took my approved vacation. He had created the very evidence that would burn his kingdom to the ground. I saved the PDF to a thumb drive. I emailed a copy to my personal account with the subject line, Vacation Photos, Spain. I looked at the document one last time, the cold, hard text that confirmed his illegal retaliation. He called me a process drone. He was right. And this drone was about to follow the process, the legal process, all the way to the end. The game wasn't over. I had just found the master cheat code. The next morning, I walked into the office and became the ghost of myself. The red-hot fury and the subsequent icy revelation had cooled into something new, a quiet, chilling purpose. I was a project manager, and this was my new project. Project Chimera. Phase 1, Malicious Compliance. David saw me at my desk, head down, keyboard clicking at a steady, productive rhythm. He probably expected tears, a dramatic resignation, or at the very least, a sullen attitude. I gave him none of that. I gave him the drone he wanted. I completed my tasks with flawless, robotic efficiency. I answered emails within minutes. I updated my project trackers with meticulous detail. I did my job exactly as it was defined in my employment contract, and not a single second more. The Sarah who stayed late, who volunteered for extra work, who lived and breathed Innovatech, was gone. In her place was a perfect, passionless machine. The ultimate test came that afternoon. Jessica, looking nervous and overwhelmed, approached my desk holding a printout of a project charter. "Sarah," she started, her voice barely a whisper, "I'm a little lost on the resource forecasting for the Phoenix Initiative. You were on the initial scoping for this, and the old me would have bristled. The old me would have felt a pang of bitterness that my project was now hers. The new me saw an opportunity. I gave her a calm, helpful smile. "Of course, Jessica. Let's book 30 minutes. I'll walk you through my original models. I want to make sure your transition is as smooth as possible." She looked relieved, then grateful. From across the office, I saw David watching our interaction. He gave a slight, approving nod, a smug little smirk on his face. He thought he was seeing a dog that had been put back on its leash, a workhorse that had accepted its place in the stable. He had no idea he was watching a predator lull its prey into a false sense of security. During my lunch break, I didn't eat. I sat in my car in the parking garage, my laptop balanced on my knees, connected to my phone's hotspot. My search history was no longer about labor law. It was about lawyers. I vetted employment law firms the way I vetted enterprise software vendors, creating a spreadsheet comparing their success rates, client testimonials, and partner profiles. I wasn't looking for the biggest firm. I was looking for a shark. I found her in a boutique firm downtown, a woman named Anya Sharma, whose bio was short, brutal, and full of seven-figure settlements against companies much bigger than Innovatech. I took a half day of personal time for a root canal. My appointment was on the 34th floor of a steel and glass tower that gleamed in the afternoon sun. Anya Sharma's office was minimalist and immaculate. She was sharp, dressed in a severe black suit, and her eyes missed nothing. I didn't cry or vent. I simply opened my laptop, pulled up the folder I had prepared for David, and presented my case. I walked her through my performance reviews, the emails, the vacation policy. I spoke in the calm, measured tones of a project manager delivering a status update. When I finished, she nodded slowly. "It's a strong case for retaliation, but a he said, she said can be tough. It depends on who a jury finds more credible." "I have one more thing," I said. I navigated to the file named Vacation Photos Spain and opened the PDF of David's nomination form. I turned the laptop toward her. She leaned in, her eyes scanning the text. I watched as her professional composure cracked, just for a second. A slow, predatory smile spread across her face. It was the smile of a wolf that had just been handed a map to the sheep pen. "My God," she whispered, looking up at me with a newfound respect. "He put it in writing. He actually put it in writing." She leaned back in her chair. "Sarah, they don't just have a problem, they have a catastrophe. He didn't just hand you a smoking gun, he handed you a signed confession with a ballistics report." She slid a retainer agreement across the polished desk. As I signed my name, a profound calm washed over me. The mechanism was set. The legal gears were now turning, silent and inexorable. The rest of the week was a blur of perfect, detached work. On Friday, as I was packing my bag at 5 p.m. on the dot, David strolled by my desk. He leaned against the partition, arms crossed, radiating smug satisfaction. "Leaving on time again, Sarah," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Glad to see you're finally embracing a healthier work-life balance. Guess you learned your lesson about burning out." He was mocking me one last time, reminding me of my place, of the lesson he thought he had taught me. He believed he had won. He believed I had been broken and remade into a more compliant employee. He saw a drone. He saw a flight risk he had successfully grounded. I paused, my hand on my bag. I looked up and met his gaze. I didn't say a word. I just let a small, quiet smile touch my lips. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a project manager whose riskiest, most complex project was about to launch, perfectly and on schedule. He frowned, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. The smile didn't compute. It didn't fit his narrative. I said nothing. I just held his gaze for a second longer, then turned and walked away. The click of my heels on the polished floor the only sound. He had no idea the war had already started, and he had already lost. The 2 weeks that followed were an exercise in excruciating self-control. I performed my duties with the precision of a surgeon and the emotional range of a server rack. I was the perfect employee, punctual, efficient, and utterly devoid of initiative. I watched as David preened, basking in his victory. He'd made an example of me, and now he paraded Jessica around like a trophy, delegating tasks to her that were clearly beyond her depth. The Phoenix Initiative was already behind schedule, and I could see the panic beginning to fray the edges of her forced confidence. Every time she came to me for help, which was often, I would calmly and politely provide exactly what she asked for, and nothing more. David saw my compliance as submission. He had no idea it was a countdown. The day my lawyer, Anya, had designated as D-Day arrived like any other Tuesday. The office hummed with its usual low-grade anxiety. David was in his glass-walled office, laughing loudly on a call, feet up on his desk. He was the king in his castle, untouchable. At 10:15 a.m., a man I didn't recognize stepped off the elevator. He wasn't a client. He was dressed in a nondescript suit that was just a little too baggy, and he carried a single, thick manila envelope. He approached the department admin's desk. I watched, my hands hovering over my keyboard, my heart a slow, heavy drum against my ribs. The admin pointed toward David's office. The man walked to the glass door and knocked once. David waved him in with an annoyed flick of his wrist, not even bothering to take his feet off the desk. I saw him mouth, "What is it?" The man said something I couldn't hear and held out the envelope. David finally swung his feet to the floor, his expression one of pure irritation. He took the envelope, and the man said a few more words before turning and walking away, his job complete. David looked at the envelope, a flicker of curiosity replacing his annoyance. He probably thought it was a legal notice about some vendor contract, a minor inconvenience. He ripped it open with a careless tear. He pulled out the thick stack of papers inside, his eyes scanning the first page. And then he froze. It was as if someone had hit a pause button on his entire existence. His body went absolutely still. The smug, relaxed posture vanished, replaced by a sudden, rigid tension. I saw his eyes dart back to the top of the page, then down again, his lips moving silently as he reread the first few lines. The color drained from his face, leaving a sickly, pale mask. He looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. He dropped into his chair, the papers trembling in his hand. He fumbled to put them on the desk, his movements clumsy and uncoordinated. One hand went to his collar, tugging at a tie that was suddenly too tight. His gaze, wide and frantic, lifted from the document and shot around the office, a cornered animal looking for the source of the attack. His eyes swept past Jessica, past the other team members who were beginning to notice the strange tableau in his office, and then they found me. They locked onto mine. In that single, silent moment across 20 yards of open-plan office space, he knew. The shock in his eyes curdled into a dawning, horrified understanding. He saw my perfectly calm expression. He saw the ghost of the smile I'd given him that Friday. He remembered calling me a drone, a flight risk. He remembered his own words from his own signed document, now staring back at him in cold, legal print. Leadership vacuum created by Sarah Morgan's extended vacation. He had been so proud of that phrase. Now, it was the first nail in his coffin. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply held his gaze, my expression as neutral as a freshly formatted hard drive. I let him see that his world was collapsing, not because of a fit of anger or a burst of emotion, but because of a calm, logical, and perfectly executed plan. He had laughed at my paperwork. Now paperwork was going to destroy him. The spell broke. He scrambled for his phone, his hand shaking so badly he almost dropped it. He stabbed at the screen, his panicked breathing fogging the glass wall in front of him. The entire department was watching now, the quiet hum of work replaced by a tense, confused silence. The king was off his throne, his castle walls turning to dust around him. He wasn't a leader. He was just a man in a suit who had made a fatal, arrogant mistake. I turned back to my monitor. I clicked open my project tracker for the Atlas account maintenance sprint. I updated a task from in progress to complete. And as David's panicked, muffled voice began shouting into his phone, I started typing. The work, after all, had to be done. Project Chimera was proceeding on schedule. The summons came an hour later, not from David, but from Margaret, the Director of Human Resources. The meeting invitation was for a conference room on the executive floor, a sterile, intimidating space I had only ever been in to present project updates to the board. The subject line was simply, urgent discussion. My lawyer, Anya, had told me to expect it. They'll try to contain the blast radius, she'd said. They'll bring their own lawyer. Don't speak unless I nod at you. Let them reveal their position first. I walked in with Anya at my side. The air in the room was thick, with a toxic cocktail of panic and expensive cologne. On one side of the vast mahogany table sat Margaret, her face a mask of corporate neutrality, and a man in a pinstripe suit I recognized as Innovatech's general counsel. On the other side, slumped in his chair, was David. He looked 10 years older than he had that morning. His face was ashen, his tie was loose, and his eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. He wouldn't look at me. The pinstripe suit, whose name was apparently Arthur, started the proceedings. His voice was smooth as polished stone, designed to soothe and minimize. "Sarah," he began, ignoring Anya completely. "Thank you for coming. It seems there's been a significant misunderstanding. We've received this." He gestured disdainfully at a copy of my lawsuit on the table. "And frankly, we're all a bit baffled. Innovatech values you. We want to resolve this amicably. We're prepared to offer you a generous severance package, 3 months, salary, to help you transition." Anya let out a soft, humorless laugh. It was the same condescending little puff of air David had used on me in his office. The sound made him flinch. "Arthur," Anya said, her voice cutting through his placating tone like a shard of glass, "let's dispense with the theater. We are not here to discuss a severance package. We are here to discuss the damages resulting from a clear-cut case of illegal retaliation under the California Fair Employment and Housing Act, a case for which your client's director was kind enough to provide a signed confession." Arthur's jaw tightened. "That document can be interpreted in many ways." "It can be interpreted in one way," Anya interrupted, "and a jury will have no trouble with the interpretation. We're happy to let them try." That's when David finally cracked. The carefully constructed walls of his corporate authority had crumbled, leaving only a terrified man. He looked up, his gaze finally finding mine across the table. His eyes were wide and pleading. "Sarah, please," he rasped, his voice cracking. "Don't do this. It was a mistake." A poor choice of words. "I'll fix it. I'll talk to the board. We can make you the director. We can fix this. Just tell them to stop." The begging. It was more pathetic than I could have imagined. This was the man who had laughed in my face, who had called me a drone, who had stolen my work and my future and then mocked me for it. I felt nothing. No pity, no anger, just the cold, quiet hum of a process running its course. I looked at him, my face a perfect blank, and then I turned my gaze to Arthur. Arthur, seeing his star witness self-immolating, tried to regain control. "Ms. Morgan, Sarah, David is obviously under a great deal of stress. Let's be reasonable. What is it you want?" Anya gave me a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. It was my turn. The floor was mine. I leaned forward slightly, placing my hands on the table. "Reasonable left the building when my boss punished me for taking an approved vacation," I said, my voice steady and devoid of emotion. "You're operating under the assumption that this is a negotiation. It isn't." I paused, letting the silence hang in the air. "My lawyer has explained the strength of our case. The law is clear. There is no ambiguity. A judge will rule in my favor. So let me be clear about what happens next. You will pay the damages my lawyer and I have calculated. Pay me, or a sheriff will be seizing your assets to cover the judgment when we win. And we will win." Arthur started to speak, but I held up a hand. "This isn't about severance. It's about damages. Punitive damages. For the lost promotion, for the stolen bonus, for the years of my career that you tried to derail out of petty arrogance. I looked from Arthur's stunned face to David's broken one. You asked what I want. I want compensation. The price for making this lawsuit go away just went up. I let the threat land. The final number, I said, my voice dropping to a calm, clear, and final tone, is $200,000. You will wire the funds and have the settlement agreement at my lawyer's office within 24 hours. This offer is not negotiable. I stood up, pushing my chair back. Anya rose with me. The three of them stared at me, dumbfounded. The drone had just dictated the terms of their surrender. The flight risk had just flown circles around them. Otherwise, I finished, looking directly at David one last time. We'll see you in court. The oversized FedEx envelope arrived the next afternoon. It felt anticlimactic, just another package delivered to my minimalist apartment. But when I slid it open, the check slid out onto my kitchen counter. There it was, $200,000. The number was printed with the same sterile corporate font that had been on my pay stubs for 5 years. But this felt different. This wasn't a wage. It was a ransom. It was the price of their silence. And my freedom. I picked it up, the paper cool and heavy in my hand. It didn't feel like victory. Not yet. It felt like a receipt for a lesson learned the hard way. I took a picture of it with my phone. Then I put it back in the envelope. There was no celebration. No champagne, just the quiet, profound satisfaction of a project plan executed to perfection. 2 weeks later, I got a text from a former colleague. You won't believe this, it read, followed by a screenshot of an internal company memo. David Hess had been separated from the company to pursue other opportunities. The corporate euphemism was so bland, it was almost insulting. But I knew what it meant. I heard more through the grapevine later. After the settlement, the board had taken a closer look at his department. They found the Phoenix Initiative, the project he'd handed to Jessica, in complete shambles and millions over budget. My malicious compliance had given Jessica just enough rope to hang herself, and David along with her. He hadn't just cost them a lawsuit. His poor leadership had cost them a flagship project. He wasn't a king dethroned in a blaze of glory. He was just a liability that had been quietly, unceremoniously written off the balance sheet, a drone made obsolete. That check didn't make me rich, but it made me free. The first thing I did was pay off my student loans in one lump sum. Watching that six-figure debt vanish from my life felt more liberating than holding the check itself. For the first time since college, I owed nothing to anyone. The weight that had driven me, that had made me accept the late nights and missed birthdays as a necessary sacrifice, was just gone. I didn't stay at Innovatech to gloat. I didn't even stay in that world. I took 3 months off and went back to Spain. This time there were no phones, no laptops, no emergencies. I saw the Alhambra. I ate paella by the sea. I let the sun bake away the last of the fluorescent light pallor from my skin. Now, I run my own shop. It's a small project management consultancy. I take on clients I believe in, and I work with people I respect. My contracts are ironclad, and my work-life balance is non-negotiable. My company is built on the very things David mocked: meticulous documentation, transparent processes, and the radical idea that people do their best work when they're treated with fairness and respect. I'm not a workhorse anymore. I'm the one who owns the stable. I built a better game with better rules. Looking back, the injustice I faced was the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to see that the path I was on, the one I'd sacrificed everything for, was a dead end. David made the mistake of thinking the rules only applied to people like me. He forgot that the most dangerous person in the room is the one who understands the system better than you do. He thought he was playing chess, but he didn't realize I was the one who designed the board. It just goes to show you what can happen when you stop playing their game and start writing your own. If you're interested in hearing more stories about flipping the script, maybe you should stick around for the next one.